Statistics Canada has admitted the unemployment rate is not even accurate, and we're going to get into what is going on in Alberta because there is some crazy things going on in that province. So anyway, let's start off with Calgary's unemployment rate hits 8.5% as poverty gap widens, but it's what Statistics Canada said in this article, which is hilarious. Calgary's unemployment rate rose to almost 9% in June, a statistic that worries advocates as the city's poverty gap widens. And think about it, guys. When you're looking at what is going on in Alberta right now, you've got net migration, international migration, that has absolutely exploded. I mean, the charts are pretty good in Alberta, and they go all the way back to 1961. And just look at this population explosion in Alberta. It's not just people moving into provincially. They are just a small fraction of the amount of people. If you look in the last quarter, there was 9.1 thousand people that came into provincially. But if you look at the amount of international immigrants that have come, it's over 3 times that. So it's absolutely insane the amount of immigration that is coming in. Alberta is kicking into its third phase of the Alberta is Calling program. I mean, it's just unbelievable. This is something that nobody voted for in Alberta, but yet they are spending taxpayer dollars and literally giving away money to incentivize people to come to the province. And what's that going to do? That's going to push up inflation more, push up the cost of housing. I mean, the government in Alberta, the UCP government, it just goes to show how you can go from the NDP to the UCP. You can change the UCP leader and you just get the same old politics time and time again. It's just a different face and person who's doing the virtue signaling, trying to make sure their voters actually think they're standing up for them. And Danielle Smith, she does a pretty good job of doing that, despite being as sleazy as Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley, former premiers of Alberta. So it's very interesting what's going on. But you've got to listen to this because this is hilarious. According to the latest data from Statistics Canada, Calgary's unemployment rate rose to 8.5%, up 0.4 percentage points higher than May. This is higher than the national average of 6.4% and higher than other major cities like Vancouver at 5.6%, Toronto 7.8%, Montreal 6.2%, and Edmonton 7.1%. It is also the highest rate of the second consecutive month among major Canadian cities, with Toronto in second place. However, Statistics Canada said the figures may fluctuate widely because they are based on small statistical samples. So now Statistics Canada is coming out and saying, yeah, you know what, the unemployment rate, it's not that accurate after all. And I agree with that. I don't think the unemployment rate is accurate. If you go over to shadow stats, obviously you've seen the inflation data many times, and this is all based off US unemployment and how it's changed over the prior decades. And if you look back at what's happened, if you measure using the U6 unemployment numbers, you would be at around about 7 or 8% in the United States right now. If you use the shadow stats unemployment figures, you're talking about an unemployment rate of around 25%, which is drastically different to the claimed under 5% right now in the United States. So it shows how unemployment rates can vary widely. And I would argue that the unemployment rate in Canada is extremely high because the amount of international immigration that Canada is getting into the country, it simply cannot sustain the jobs for these people coming in. And Statistics Canada is right when they say they're just taking a small sample size, so it doesn't really paint the whole story of what's actually going on with unemployment in Canada, which is it's much worse than they actually claim. So even in places like Calgary, it's probably already a fact of the unemployment being double digits. It's just that the unemployment rate hasn't caught up to that yet. And the trajectory and trend of that unemployment rate just continues to go up. Meanwhile, people continue to move there out of pure desperation, really, because they just simply can't afford to live in any other parts of Canada. But the irony, the whole situation, is the cost of living in Alberta and in Calgary in particular is skyrocketing much faster than everywhere else in Canada, and it won't be long before it catches up with everywhere else in in Canada. They've already got the highest inflation rate in the country in Alberta. And I think that's part of the reason why the government has unveiled this new plan and this new phase, which is a $5,000 bonus to help offset the cost of moving to Alberta for eligible skilled tradespeople. I mean, this is just unbelievable to me. How on earth could anybody call the government of Alberta conservative is beyond me with a straight face, because you look at what they are doing and it's far from conservative. They are pursuing exactly the same immigration type policies of Justin Trudeau, but even more extreme. They're trying to provide stimulus money to incentivize more people to move. From what I've heard from people who live in the province, there is no skill shortage for skilled tradespeople right now. In fact, there's a complete surplus. So it's very hilarious that you've got them providing this $5,000 bonus that is happening. And then another crazy thing, I mean, this is the craziest thing I've seen in a while, is Alberta to launch permanent residency pathway for police officers. So this is coming from immigration.ca, and you just have to hear this because this is just completely insane. Alberta's provincial nominee program will launch a new permanent residency immigration program for foreign nationals hoping to work in Canada as police officers. We are creating a new Alberta Advantage immigration program pathway for law enforcement to help Alberta's police services address crime and meet their recruitment objectives for public protection. Notes an update on the AAIP website. Invited applicants must have a job offer from an Alberta Association of Chiefs of a Police member and meet all express entry criteria. Eligible employees for law enforcement nominations must be members of the Alberta Associations of Chief of Police. So they're basically incentivizing people to come over, foreigners to come over to Canada, and police Canadians in particular in Alberta. I mean, it is crazy. If you look at the timeline of events of what's happened with the migration focus in Alberta and the government propaganda campaign, it has got completely out of hand now. I mean, this was started by Jason Kenney, who was the former premier and leader of the UCP before Danielle Smith got in charge, and has just continued it and ramped it up with more and more things. But nobody voted for this. If you ask any Albertan, I doubt anybody will support the government bringing more and more people into their province. In fact, most Albertans that I've spoke with don't want any more people to come to the province, and they're saying that we're full. Don't let any more people in. And I see that in the comments too. So I find it absolutely hilarious that you've got this liberal style campaign on immigration going on in the so-called quote unquote most conservative province in Canada. This should be an eye-opener for everybody who supports the federal conservatives of what's going to come, because the UCP is definitely more conservative than the federal conservatives. So it's very interesting that you've got this going on. And then you've also got more and more that are relying on foreign workers. Again, this is happening in Alberta. More and more LMIAs that have been issued, which are basically a labor market impact assessment. And these things are mostly got through lawyers, and there is just so much fraud in this area. So just because people are granted these LMIAs, it does not mean that those workers are actually needed. It just means that they fulfilled this certain criteria and probably paid a lawyer to do so to get their application approved. So anyway, as the federal temporary foreign worker program expands, employers in Alberta are relying them to fill more labor gaps in business, finance, and administration roles. And again, I don't think these labor gaps are happening because you don't have the Canadians here and all the immigrants that we've had over the past 3 to 4 years that have come to the country. I mean, the population has exploded. I think it's purely because the employers don't want to pay a high enough wage to these people. It's always the same when it comes to immigration, this wage suppression that it puts on to the average people, to the poor and middle class. Those are the people who feel the most effects from immigration. People like Justin Trudeau, Danielle Smith, they don't feel any of the effect, and they live in a dream world. So it's kind of crazy. And so many of you were asking me to cover what is going on in Alberta, and it is just crazy. And especially that police thing, I find that completely ridiculous. ridiculous and almost a security risk as well. And then you've also got auto insurers that are exiting Alberta. I mean, nothing just seems to be going right in that province, to be honest. Unemployment's rising, economy was never fixed, is more broken than it's ever been, just under the facade of the high migration makes the economy look a little better than it actually is. But once you break away from that, you're able to see what the economy is actually like under the skin. So you've had Sonnet and Aviva that have both recently pulled out of Alberta auto insurance, and you've also got global credit ratings agencies that are warning that more and more of these insurers are going to leave, and they're simply leaving because they're not making money, guys. So what is going on? According to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, injury costs, including legal costs and fees following vehicle accidents, jumped 79% in Alberta between 2012 and 2022. The average bodily injury claim following an accident in Alberta is now $81,000, among the highest in Canada. And even the insurers themselves came up with a pretty good idea on how you could actually fix this problem. The insurance industry has proposed a different solution, one where drivers could choose to pay a lower premium by waiving the ability to sue if they sustain a minor injury. Those with serious injuries would continue to have legal recourse after an accident just like today. And I think that's a fairly good way of attacking what's going on. Kind of crazy as well, because you've had the Conservative government in Alberta that has also frozen people's premiums. So people's premiums are about to skyrocket when that cap ends. And they were criticizing the NDP when the NDP were in for putting in an insurance cap. They then removed it and then went back to the cap. So it's just absolutely hilarious. You know, as I've said time and time again, you change these governments, but you're really just changing the face. The same policies, the same people lobbying on the back end are still getting what they want, and nothing really changes. I mean, if you look at what's happened in Alberta with the change of governments that you've had over the past decade, it's an interesting one because it's been purely the economy has been based on what's happening with energy prices and this boom bust cycle of migration. And it purely depends on when the leaders and the party gets in. I mean, the UCP took the tailwind of having higher oil prices and the inflation crisis that followed that. But then they're also having to deal with the aftermath of that now. Oil prices aren't as high as they were, and they've also got the higher cost of everything, and most of the citizens just aren't happy. So I find it really, really hilarious, guys. I honestly think that Alberta will go back to the NDP in the next election. I mean, you could see the Conservative support was waning in Alberta with the election of Danielle Smith. I think that's going to continue because the cost of living is skyrocketing, and she's trying to help with that as much as possible by increasing the cost of living, which is just unbelievable way of attacking it. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN to protect your privacy, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. That's the affiliate link for this channel. And I will see you guys